today. I'm really excited to have the privilege to interview Minerva today on stage. So give it up for Minerva, you guys. We're really excited to have her. So Minerva, in September, can you believe it's going to be 2 years since Mayor de Blasio announced your appointment as New York City's first ever CTO?
Yeah, so that was, well, you'll have to excuse me because I want to take a picture of all of you. This is like the coolest thing. You should be so, I'm so inspired to see all your faces here, and it's just so exciting. So I'm sorry, I'm going to be a tourist, and here I am at Google. I mean, this is like with all of you here, and with you, look at that.
We need to do a selfie.
Oh, right. Oh, yes, we'll do that. Okay, now we can start.
Wow, you are so humble.
It was really like one of the most surreal, kind of crazy experiences in my life. This was at the 10th anniversary of New York Tech meetup. That my appointment to the first ever Chief Technology Officer was announced. And, for me, leaving the 30 years in the private sector, I started my first software company in 1985. It was an artificial intelligence company. And I was a junior, actually, still. I still had another semester or so to go. But I went to the West Coast to start my first company. And then to sort of fast forward and see this really tall guy talk about someone and realizing that he was talking about me as the first ever CTO was just incredible. And I've always wanted to find a way to help to help have a bigger impact, to have a platform for the issues that I care about, to improve the diversity in technology. When I started in the 80s, there were only about a third of the class were computer science majors who were women. But then I looked up 30 years later, and it was like 10%. And so that was kind of going in the wrong direction for me. And so the opportunity to have a platform for improving the numbers of women and people of color in technology, to be able to influence and have an impact on the greatest city in the world, New York, and really to kind of be able to say that the first Chief Technology Officer was, a girl from Queens who went to all New York City public schools, Bronx High School of Science, And I'm fond of saying, if you want to know what a CTO looks like, they look like me. And they look like all of you.
That's awesome. I mean, looking out at the women, I heard a few cheers when she said the Bronx high schoolers. And so I'm wondering, how many of you are kind of early in your careers, a few years out of college or kind of just starting out? Okay, a few of you. So, maybe it would be great if we could gain some of your pearls of wisdom for these young ladies here. I think you've held a series of different roles in your career. I mean, everything from product manager to strategist to team leader. And so, when you think about these women, is there any particular role that you would suggest that they pursue first? And how do you think about kind of pursuing one role in one industry and really diving deep into that, as opposed to kind of getting a more diverse portfolio of experiences and companies?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. I think for me, the secret is I actually didn't follow the path I thought I would be on. I sort of let the path find me. I've invented every job I've ever had. The founder of Manageware didn't exist before, and it's just because I went into college and I wanted to be a doctor. That was actually the plan laid out for me. But during the course of studying psychology, in particular neuropsychology, because I was interested in brain science, I started to use computers, and then I discovered that you could program computers to think possibly, and what is thinking? And so that's how I got interested in artificial intelligence. So I just sort of pursued the things that I thought were cool. And so, later on, once so we started the AI company, we sold it 5 years later to what was then the largest software company in the world, a company called Computer Associates, and just kept following the things that I was interested in. But most of the time, I had an idea of what I'd like to move on to next. And so when I decided that I wanted to be a chief technology officer, really drill into more technical topics, I sort of laid out a plan, and needed to learn about all the different domains. And so I had this rough idea in my head that I'd want to get into after being in software architecture, that I wanted to understand network infrastructure. I wanted to also understand databases. Then I moved into mobile technology, which was kind of a strange combination of all of those things, and mobile architecture was just happening. And then still trying to improve on my artificial intelligence background, which now is, it's a thing now. It's come back after 30 years. And so I did have the idea that there were areas that I was weak in, or maybe didn't know as much about. I'll tell you one quick story. While I was at Merrill Lynch, this was about 10 years ago, I had just finished the very first mobile application for the investment bank. It was BlackBerries back then, 2003, many years before the other mobile phones were invented. And I did such a great job there, they said, yeah, we need you to redo the whole data warehouse. And by the way, the last two guys that tried to do that failed and were fired. And it's
encouraging.
And it's also crashing right now. So why don't you go ahead and do that? And every fiber in my body was like, no way, I don't know enough about data structures or running a data warehouse or business intelligence. My own mentor at the time said, that's the poison pill, don't do that, And so I really thought about it. I thought, what's the worst that can happen? Here's a chance to really take on something I'd never done before, really doing more operational stuff, running a data warehouse, globally running the reporting team as well, and at the same time running the operations, re-architecting and redesigning an entire new data warehouse. And it was, because it was a burning platform, we were able to do it. We did it in 18 months, on time and on budget. And back then, I didn't realize it at the time, but that gave me a huge leg up in the coming data science and big data that was to come 10 years later. And so I have no regrets. Obviously, I wasn't fired or anything. And really built, probably, they still use it today. I still keep in touch with those folks from back then. So I guess, in short, I would say definitely have a plan, but you don't have to stick to it. You know what I mean? If you find something, if you find another turn, it's a little bit like walking down a New York street. Like, maybe you have a general direction you want to go in, but if you stop and look around, you might find some really cool things that's a little off the beaten path.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because it gives me a little bit of confidence in the approach that I've taken. I've shared Minerva's sort of windy path, and have also done a variety of different roles. Most of my work has been within Google, but it's been a lot of different teams and things within Google. Yeah. So great to hear that.
No, you're really cool. You're
I don't
awesome.
know about that.
I should be
Still
interviewing you.
got a long way to go. No, it's so exciting to be in this room with so many amazing women here, and I think being able to hear a little bit about your life and some of the things that I think are really cool about what you've done is you've often been at the cutting edge, maybe bleeding edge of some of the technologies and everything else. And I think I even heard you say that you had created many of your own roles. So I feel like there's something about inventions, in your background that keeps coming up. And I would love if you could share a little bit about, how inventions have played a role in your life, and even potentially how they might play a role in the life of many of the women here.
Absolutely. I think, women are problem solvers, right? Am I right?
For sure.
That's just, we're like born that way. And so to me, that the saying, that, necessity is the mother of invention, is true. But I also think that, my version of it is, it's to be, well, mothers make the best inventors, actually. And so, for me, a lot of what we were doing, especially a few years back, when we ended up with one of my teams, we were searching for a solution about how to manage complex workflow processes, right? So, there's a lot of things that don't happen in a stepwise fashion, and that, the answer to one thing might change the path that the computer sequence has to go on. And we were looking for this tool, and it didn't happen. I drew out like how it could work, like if we had such a system. We were looking for it, and when we discovered that, we kind of just invented this. And this is how we ended up with 4 US patents in intelligent workflow, because we knew what the solution was supposed to be, or what we needed the tool to do, and designed it. And then we're like, oh, we've invented it. And the word invention comes from like the idea of finding, discovering something. It's not actually making, right? It's actually, you've discovered something. And that's what's been so great about being an inventor and just being in an innovation sort of mode my entire career.
Yeah, that's interesting. And some of what I heard you say there too is kind of, we didn't necessarily know what we were doing. We kind of figured it out as we went along. And I often hear, I hearken back to some of the TED Talks, and you hear about fake it till you make it. And I think another kind of take on that is that nobody really knows what they're doing. I mean, when you get down to it, there's a lot of things, especially in technology, that we're all going on to try to do for the first time. And so how can you be expected to know what you're doing if it's never been done before? And so I think that's also sort of a good message for us to repeat to ourselves, as we think about being put into kind of challenging situations, and kind of how do you navigate through them. And I know you've had some challenges along your past. I'm sure that maybe you could enlighten us a little bit how you've overcome some of those.
Sure. I mean, it's good to be first, I have to say. It's harder, but I think there's this notion in technology about being first mover, but also the idea that just because it hasn't been done before, you're going to have people around and say, oh, nobody did that before, that doesn't exist. All that means is you're going to be the first. And that maybe you should be the first to do something. And so, it's been a great journey for me because of that idea that if something isn't there, that you could make it so. And so when I was at Palm many years ago, early 2000s actually, about 16 years ago, it used to be that you have to connect your personal digital assistant to your computer, and then you downloaded the data through this wire to this handheld device, and you'd be like, "Ooh, look at me! I'm so cool with my data on a little device. I'm so mobile, right? Exactly.
Connected to this wire."
And and like my team was like, "Boy, I wonder if we could like do this without the wire, like over the air, we called it, OTA, over the air." And people were like, "You're crazy, you're fired, But we persisted, and we figured out, oh, okay, well, there's this new thing called Bluetooth, and there's this, cool new thing called 2G, well, before that, it was just G, I guess. I don't know. And so, so we did that, and that was 7 years before the iPhone was even created.
Wow.
And so, so yes, in fact, people thinking you're crazy is probably a good sign. And that's what I love about technology. And so I would pursue it with all of the sense of play and creativity that you can bring to this career. That's just, it's just such a privilege to be part of an industry that is in everything now. Including in government, which is why I joined the New York City government after 30 years in tech.
Yeah, and I have a sense that when you were coming up with these different ideas and trying to kind of put them in front of people, it took a lot of motivating others, right? And I assume that there's probably a high likelihood if Palm was anything like Google is, where you don't necessarily have these people reporting directly into you. And so you've got to figure out, how am I going to get this idea across the table, get it accepted, when all of these people don't actually work for me. Can you tell us a little bit about how you develop that ability to sort of manage my influence, and maybe how some of us here in the room can develop that capability?
Yeah, another great piece of advice, especially for the CTO role, because chief technology officers typically, they might have some engineers reporting to them, or but they don't have sales or marketing reporting to them. They certainly don't have the budget folks, and so 90% of your power is going to come from outside your organization. And I think that just having influencing skills generally really is helpful to everyone, no matter what your role. But it's especially important when you're trying to get folks to follow a strategy, right? Because a strategy is just a plan. It doesn't mean that people have to follow it. You can't, move people's hands and make them type what you want, Well, that would be nice. Maybe a robot, I don't know. But I think the way I learned it did start with my first company, because I was still a junior in college. I was like 20, 21, and almost everyone else in the company was twice my age. Like we hired them and they reported to me. And I think part of it is being able to be persuasive by understanding the motivations and incentives of the people that you're working with to make it a win-win-win-win-win. It's always a good approach. It's not about, I think the biggest lesson I learned was that it's really not about advocating your position, as it were. I think a lot of people make that mistake. Like, if I could just shout as loud as possible, everyone will agree with me, although some people might think that. It really is about listening and empathizing with the folks and understanding what their point of view is, and figuring out a way forward that everyone can move in the same direction.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there about just listening to other people's perspectives, and that kind of reminds me of the fact that there's just a diversity of perspectives oftentimes that you're trying to pick up. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the fact that we often hear that we should have more women or more minorities at the table. And I'm not just talking about kind of C-level or in the boardroom, but actually there day-to-day making the decisions that drive the company forward. And I'd love to hear your perspective on why you think it's important for a company to be more diverse.
That's definitely one of my deepest passions, and one of the reasons I took this role and have been, active in a lot of women in tech initiatives throughout my career. Once I realized that I had the ladies' room all to myself, it's nice, but I think that we, there's a few factors. It's not just about fairness, right? We recognize that women-led companies outperform the S&P 500 by 3 times. So it's a proven fact. Look it up. It's all on the web. A diversity on the board, a diversity of perspectives is just good business, as it turns out. On top of that, we just in New York have 300,000 tech jobs. It generates $30 billion in wages. The U.S. Department of Labor published that there will be 1.4 million tech jobs available in the next 4 years, by year 2020, and yet we only have a pipeline to fill 29% of those jobs. So if we're not tapping half the talent of the country to fill those jobs, then our very economic survival, our competitiveness is at risk. So I think what we're seeing now is, first of all, tech is in everything, and tech should be for everyone. And you know, so not to be totally gloom and doom, you know, some of the initiatives that we've done in the city to promote more diversity in tech, it was actually just in this building a little over a year ago that, you know, someone asked me, how do we get more girls to study coding? I said, well, we should probably, you know, have it in all the New York City public schools. And now, you know, last October, Mayor de Blasio announced our Computer Science for All, which is an $80 million 10-year program to offer computer science education to every one of those 1.1 million school kids.
Awesome.
We also have the Tech Talent Pipeline, which is a unique program that aligns industry, meaning employers, with the skills that they need, and we find students who can learn and take up those courses and actually end up in jobs within 2 years of starting in the Tech Talent Pipeline. I think we're in our 5th cohort. It was started as a pilot, a small $10 million pilot, and the United States Tech Hire program is modeled off of that, so that's going national. And I have the pleasure of announcing, so do we have Black Girls Code in the room today? So one of my favorite organizations, they target young women, young black women from the age of 7 to 17. It's San Francisco based. We can announce today that Google has agreed to give Black Girls Code a permanent home in New York, right here in this building. So I want to thank Black Girls Code and Google, you know, for all the work they're doing to improve the diversity of the tech industry.
I appreciate that. We're super excited. And I mean, do you feel like there's enough being done already? You've just rattled off quite a series of initiatives and things, but do you feel like there's enough awareness and enough of a spotlight on this topic generally?
I don't think we can stop until we think of coding as a girl thing. You know, I love to say to companies, so when I talk to companies, I recently talked to a bunch of venture capitalists who came in to look at tech companies. And I said, you know, the best way to hire more women is to hire more women. Just do it already. So, you know, I don't think we can stop. I think we've got a lot of momentum and a ton of support from the private sector, from governments, from federal, city, and state levels. But we got to keep it up. You know, we want to create a tech sector here in New York. We have the #1 spot in Crunchbase, which is the TechCrunch database, for the most women-founded tech companies here in New York. #1 in the country.
It's huge.
So I think we have an opportunity here in New York to create a tech sector that is for everyone and is more diverse and more welcoming and therefore better than all the other tech sectors.
Yeah, I love hearing that because I think there's always that rivalry, I guess, if you will, between the different tech centers in the world. And I certainly feel the kind of the New York versus San Francisco one quite deeply personally. I've lived on both coasts as a result of my work. And I think there are elements of each of those tech sectors that are really interesting. But I think what is so special about New York is that diversity that we have. I mean, it's the fact that when I walk down the street, I'm hearing lots of different languages around me. I'm encountering a lot of different types of people in my day-to-day. And I think that really can help people spark ideas. And I think that's why I'm really interested in the startup space in New York. And I know, having founded a startup yourself, I wonder what you think about women in startups. And, you know, how do you see that going forward in New York? You mentioned kind of the largest number of female founders, but what about just some of the folks here? How might they start to get involved?
First of all, women tech founders rule, okay? It really is that, I'm just like living the dream here, being able to work with so many great women techies and women founders. But we're also looking at the whole ecosystem. We want to create more angel investment in women founders, more access to capital, more access to technology. And so for those of you who have a great idea and you want to develop it, there are a ton of opportunities. You should definitely check out our website called digital.nyc. That's sort of the one-stop shop for all things tech. They've got all the hackathons and classes. If you want to meet other founders, there's all kinds of sort of startup events over the weekend. So a typical hackathon might be, people pitch their ideas, then on a Friday, then on Saturday, develop the idea, develop a presentation, and maybe do a little prototyping. Sunday, you're coming up, finalizing maybe your business plan, your monetization plan, and then there's a judging usually, and then the winner gets something cool, plus bragging rights, and and they have those every weekend in New York, like a ton of them. So if you have, I think the best way to learn anything is to just go ahead and do it. And it's also a fun social event. There are hackathons just for women as well, and girls hackathons and high school hackathons and NASA data hackathons. And so if you want to get into data science, there's some really great things to do there. The Museum of Natural History, the NASA data one, and then the New York City Big Apps competition, which is the largest civic hacking competition around. So there's so many fun things, and it's really just like get up off your couch, go and put a name tag on, and try it, and you will be amazed and inspired by the people that you meet.
I'm sure it's judging from the looks of you guys. I mean, this is quite a turnout for a Saturday. So I have a small sense that you guys might not be too afraid of putting in a few more hours on the weekend. So that sounds like some great ideas for these guys. I think the other thing that I've noticed, and as I've kind of looked at startups and I've looked at the different functions within startups, and then also at the public sector, is just the trend and the growing trend towards CTOs in the public sector. And I think whether it's somebody like my former boss, Megan Smith, over at the White House, Sarah Wilkinson, who's in the UK, or you, I mean, I wonder how can we foster more of this and exposing more people to what it's like to be a CTO, and how do you start to take those initial steps to get down that path?
Yeah, I think, of course, I'm biased, but I think CTO is a really, really cool job. I mean, there are tons of cool jobs in technology, but I think what's interesting about the CTO role is really it's always the intersection of the technology with the business that you're in. So when my first ever CTO job was in 1997 at Gray Advertising. So we had this idea that maybe the internet thing might have some impact on advertising.
Small inkling.
And you have to imagine a time when, again, in 97, it was just a couple years into the web, the World Wide Web, and people didn't have fast connections, and so if you wanted to download an image, you could watch it download like a line at a time. And we had this cool idea that you could click on an image and it would take you to another site. Wow. And so so that created this opportunity. It was the first ever CTO at Gray, because it was like, wow, this may be an entire new product line here. The click on a picture and go somewhere product line, and so so that was sort of my first my first kind of exposure to the idea that you could take all that technical knowledge and clearly there was a lot of technology. We later developed ways to track the clicks and blah blah blah. I don't need to bore you with all that. You probably know, but also to do it in the service of creating revenue, creating new products with it. And so, similar to 12 years earlier, thinking about the artificial intelligence and then how do you create a product with that and sell it to people who will pay money for it and things like that. And so what I love about the CTO role is it is very much rooted in engineering, but it's also understanding what the applications of it are. And so when you apply that to government or when you apply that to society, that's when you get into the good stuff, right? So last year, we just started to put them in. We are turning all the New York City's payphones into free Wi-Fi hotspots. Anybody use a payphone? So cool. It's good for hiding from the rain, I guess. But, people put their coffee cups and stuff in there.
They still have one at my gym. I can't figure out why it's still there.
Well, we can turn it into a hotspot for you.
That'd be great.
So, so that's a cool application. But even more importantly, just providing more access, providing more opportunities for people to use technology, and how can we help change society, really, truly democratize society by providing more technology for more people.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love about technology is just the flexibility that can come with it. I mean, you know very well from working in the mobile industry and everything, just sort of what that has enabled us to do as humans. And I know I caught a glimpse of your daughter over there. And I was just wondering, how has technology helped you do all that you do, whether it's in your role as a mother or in your role as CTO and all the hobbies and things that I'm sure you have outside of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think, so I don't want to embarrass her, but it's funny, the story that I like to tell is that the day I found out I was going to be offered the CTO job, I also found out that I was going to have a child. And I was 17 and 8 months ago. And, I was really struck by, I was just stopped. I was wondering, should I take this job? Should I take the big tech job and try and be a mom at the same time? And luckily for me, I talked to a really good friend who said, why are you even choosing? You're going to be great at both. I don't know if my daughter would agree, but and so later on I realized that I wanted to be home in the evenings, and at that time you had to be in your office to get your email. And so I thought, I got to figure out a way that I could check my email securely, from home. And then later that turned into, how do I get my email on a phone also securely so that I could go home, make dinner, and then do some work after dinner. And so and that was one of the projects that I did very early on, and how I even got into mobile tech originally, was so that I could have the flexibility to still be able to do work, take meetings, and do emails, but pushing a stroller in the park at the same time. So in many ways, being a mom made me a better technologist, not the other way around.
I think that's a great message for people, because I just too often I think people kind of can get hung up on feeling like they can only do one thing and do one thing really well. And I think that you're a prime example of being able to do a lot of things really well. And so I encourage all of you to take that step and to kind of really put yourselves out there when you're faced with multiple things to take on at once. So I'd love to ask you a little bit about the recent tech awards that were hosted in New York. So can you tell me about some of the people that were honored that night?
Oh yeah, this was an incredible, inspiring event last week. It was the first ever Diversity in Tech Awards. It was sponsored by Code Interactive, one of the great nonprofits who are providing coding courses all around New York City public schools. And the honorees were amazing. One honoree was a CSNYC, Computer Science New York City, which was founded by Fred Wilson, who's one of the partners at Union Square Ventures. They are the city's partners in the Computer Science for All. So it was a combination of this public-private partnership that made it possible between the Department of Education, City Hall, and CSNYC, and they were one of the recipients of the award. One of my favorites is Julia Geist. She was a student at the Tech Talent Pipeline, and she is now an engineer at WikiHub, and so she also received an award because it didn't take her long to feel like she also had to give back, just 2 years in. So there were some amazing folks that night. It was sort of the cap off to Social Media Week, but it just showed how much support there is to provide more opportunities to more people, and all of the great organizations that are in New York that are out there to help.
So how are we doing on time? I think we may want to start to wrap up so that we can save some time for questions. So maybe I'll close on something forward-looking. I'd love to know, what is your vision for the New York City tech community in the next 5 to 10 years? And then when you even think beyond the next 5 to 10 years, and you're thinking about what's the person who's sitting in your job, say 15, 20 years from now, what do you hope are the problems or challenges that they'll be solving at that point?
Yeah, I think we're seeing some of the seeds of this amazing future of New York City already. One of the biggest trends, I think, is the notion of social innovation, this tech for good, because being a woman in tech and being a coder is a superpower. And we need to use our superpowers for good. How can we use technology to help the poorest among us, the immigrants, the people that have no voice? And this is just, it's one of the privileges of my role is I get to see all the people that are making that happen. And so, yes, it's okay to use tech, to sell a few more pencils or, but, or do you want some socks to go with those pencils or whatever it is. But, to be able to use those kinds of technologies to really deliver government services where they can do the most good, to provide, to come up with new wireless technologies that'll expand broadband to the digital deserts. That is really taking hold, and I think New York City really is the epicenter of a lot of that activity because it's an ecosystem of social do-gooder techies that are all meeting and percolating together. When we think about the city streets and the idea of a connected city, again, I see a huge opportunity where right now we have a lot of the personal technology, and sometimes that has the effect of actually alienating us from each other.
Completely.
Like we're there, but we're not there. That photo of everyone at dinner, but they're all looking at their phone. Like, are they at dinner together? Really? Or are they just sitting within a few feet of each other, but doing someplace else?
I saw a couple on a date the other night that was very much like that. I was like, I'm pretty sure they're on a date. But neither of them was talking to each other, and they were both looking at their phones for like 30 minutes while we were just kind of passing by. So I completely understand that concept of alienation.
And I think that we can have a notion of technology that actually connects us better. And there's no better place than in sort of public spaces. So yes, we're going to have the self-driving cars, and that you can call up with your phone. That's all going to happen for sure. But also, I think we have an opportunity to say, how can we connect the virtual and physical communities to connect each other? And how do we make our streets safer? How do we use technology to, band together? I've seen a lot of apps that are like, well, who are the homebound folks in your building, and maybe you could, bring them food once in a while, or in an emergency, how we get together and help our neighbors who might be flooded out. And so I think we have a real, not just an opportunity, but a responsibility as folks who have this superpower to really figure out the vision of New York City as a smart and equitable city, a city whose heart is as big as our brains.
That's an amazing picture and kind of painting in your head to go off into the world with. So I know I, for one, am very excited to continue to work here and be able to experience life in New York and work in New York. And I'm really appreciative that you've given me some time to get to know you a little bit better. And I feel like since I've had the privilege of asking all the questions, maybe I should turn it over to you guys. And so if you guys have any questions, feel free to go up to the mics, and I'm sure Minerva would love to answer.
Hi everyone, my name is Maureen. I am a NYC Tech advisor, and I've got actually 2 questions. I'm going to keep it really quick. The first is for the audience. Rarely do you ask questions to the audience, but just by a show of hands, how many people here came to obviously meet new folks and hopefully collaborate on different projects? Just by a show of hands. We know you've got full-time jobs. Okay, cool, awesome. And then Minerva, can you talk about artificial intelligence and some of the use cases for some of the top companies? What are they doing with artificial intelligence now and in the next 5 years? Thanks.
Oh, cool! I love the geeky questions. Thank you for that. Oh, I love geeking out. So when I started 30 years ago. The biggest change between then and now, and people ask, why didn't you continue with your AI after you sold your first company? And the truth is that between 1990 and 2000, it's called the AI winter. Everybody was really disappointed that AI didn't deliver what it promised, and all of the venture capital for AI dried up during that decade. So I found other stuff to do, clearly. But now we have even more powerful opportunity with artificial intelligence because we have 3 main factors. One, we have massive compute now because of the way that we can do it. We were working on, this was before even the 286 was invented, right? So I won't bore you, but we had to basically turn a crank, to make the computer go. And secondly, we have massive data, right? Because before we couldn't compute all that data, and now we've got massive data from which to apply, the deep learning to. And the third big component, of course, is the massive connectivity. So that was all 30 years ago, was pre-internet, and those 3 things are the magic sauce that's now why AI and just sort of intelligence systems generally is finally coming to its own, right? And so what I see is the future not of replacing human intelligence, which is what artificial intelligence means sometimes. I think of AI now as an intelligent assistance, right? It's going to allow us to really process all the crazy amounts of data, because now we're spewing, terabytes of data every few minutes, right? My watch, the phones, everybody's phone is spewing out all kinds of data and information. So I think we can use intelligent assistance to help us make humans smarter instead of trying to replace what humans do.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelby. I'm from Florida State University. I'm a sophomore. Just a quick question regarding women in tech. So there's something that you said that kind of really spoke to me. And recently I went into an interview with a tech company, and the interviewer was like, well, yeah, you're a woman, it's part of the reason why you're here. And I was like, He's like, no, you're qualified, but, and every time somebody says but, they don't mean what they said at first. And then it is a common theme here, too, to get more women in tech, and you want to see more women in tech. However, do you feel that there will come a day whenever there's too many women and men suddenly become the minority? And how do we stop that? Because one thing that's very important is that women are underrepresented in the tech field, and everything that's being created is all by a male's mentality. So by getting women in and being able to collaborate, we have both sides. But do you think there will ever be a day where women become too much, and how do we stop that from happening? How do we get to the perfect 50-50?
It's such an interesting question because, I don't know if the idea is to be this perfect 50-50. Well, what I look at as, my parents and grandparents grew up in a time where being a woman doctor or being a woman lawyer was like a big deal. I look forward to the time when it's just not a big deal right? That is just like, yeah, woman doctor, and woman technologist. So sort of whether that's a percentage, it's much more cultural. This idea that, I think we're right to bring attention to it now because it's clearly an issue, economic and fairness for both those reasons. But also, I mean, my dream is that, yeah, you're a baker, you're a mom, you're a CrossFitter, you're and you're an AI scientist, right? and so that's sort of my vision of where things can go, and I hope that that events like this sort of make it okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi.
My name is Stephanie. I'm a student at the Flatiron School right now.
Great.
My question is, we've got the New York City digital map. We've got open source data. What piece of technology that will make for a more cohesive, accessible city are you most excited about right now?
You mean besides the free Wi-Fi hotspots, which is, pretty cool.
People have actually talked about moving their offices, I think,
Right.
to like the bus stop.
I know.
Wi-Fi is better there than it is in their office or their home.
Exactly. I was, talking with someone who's like, I'm gonna have a business where I just rent chairs for $1 just next to those things. But I think that the some of the cool. So you're saying what are some of the cool tech? Well, I'll say something that my team worked on last fall. We just launched a beta. So what's also exciting is that we're able to innovate in government. Those are two words that a lot of people don't usually put together. Beta test is another one. So we took some open data and decided to expand it to make it easier for residents, because we realized that open data is great, it's fantastic, but not everyone's a data scientist. I'd love that to be the case. So we created this thing called neighborhoods.nyc. And what it is you go to neighborhoods.nyc, you pick your neighborhood, and you get all of the most popular open data feeds by neighborhood. So you could look up Chelsea.nyc, and it has the alternate side of the street parking. Everybody loves the health, ratings, including the restaurant ratings and, rat sightings and, the garbage pickups and all of that, because we looked at what was the most popular one, but it didn't come in a localized form. So we partnered with one of the winners of Big Apps, Visualytics, and now we're trying it out. So please do try neighborhoods.nyc, find your neighborhood. We hope that we can add more and more content with communities getting involved. So that's really exciting. That link between the physical and virtual communities is sort of the thing that we're driving for.
Cool. That's actually on my very long list of apps that I've started brainstorming, so I'll definitely check it out.
All right.
I will build my own.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll move on to something else. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think I'm getting the signal back there that we have time for, I think, one more question, so you'll be our last. I think the good news is you guys can come and find us afterwards if you want to ask a few more. But please do us service.
Sure thing. I'm Megan. I'm a senior developer. We've talked a lot today about getting more women into the pipeline, but something that I found just in my career is that keeping women there is just as much of an issue, and I was wondering kind of what your thoughts were around that and whether it could come from the government level trickle down or if it needs to be within the organizations themselves.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that I also focus a lot on sort of the mid-career female tech as well, because you're going great gangbusters for those first 10 years or so. Excuse me. And then you hit a bump in the road like, oh, I'm pregnant, or whatever that is, right? You might seriously consider dropping out. And I think that's when you need the intervention from the company, from the mentorship, and programs for women to come back from maternity leave. The idea that you could have, flex time And I love the idea that paternity leave is actually a big feminist issue. I think that's really important too. And so for me, what really helped me was, all the great sort of support and mentors that I had. It's hard. Any job is hard, but just sort of being, that lone, unicorn in the room is even harder, and you feel a lot more pressure. And I guess I'm here to say, there's so much support out there for you. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't feel like you have to go it alone. And you'll be amazed and inspired by how much help you get, because everybody wants you to stay and succeed.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you all so much for coming. And Minerva, thank you so much for spending some time with us
Thank
today.
you. It's been an honor.
Great. Awesome to meet you.
Thank you.